Welcome to the video about maintenance of your saxophone. This video is going to cover some of the main tips to keep your saxophone in good working condition, and we'll also cover a couple of the things that commonly go wrong with the saxophone and how to fix those things when they happen. So we're going to start today with talking about how to keep your saxophone in good working condition with some activities you should do every time you play your instrument. I'm going to be demonstrating these today on the alto saxophone, but keep in mind these things apply to both tenor and bari sax as well. I'm going to start out by talking about reed care. So when you get done playing, make sure that you don't keep your reed on your mouthpiece when you put it back in your case. That's one of the most important things I'm going to say today. There are some horror stories that I can tell you about students who have left reeds on their mouthpieces, and those things start getting chipped and warped, and worse yet, they start molding onto your mouthpiece, and you're putting that into your mouth. Mold, it's just a bad idea. So yes, does it take a few extra seconds to take that reed off the mouthpiece? It sure does, but do it. Please do it. So then, be very careful when you take that mouthpiece or the reed off of the mouthpiece so that you don't chip your reed. Again, one of the things that happens a lot of times is students complain that their saxophone's not working, and one of the first things I say, well, is let's look at your reed, and if it's chipped even a little bit, that can be causing the problem. So you need to make sure that your reed is in really good condition, okay? And you should store that reed in a plastic reed case. Now you can buy those from music stores, and actually your band director will supply an order sheet that you can order those. They usually are very cheap, and they can store 4 or 8 reeds at a time. If you don't have one of those plastic reed cases, I don't have one in front of me right now, you can use the little plastic sleeve that your reeds most likely came in the box, and just slide those in very carefully. It's really important that you don't just take your reed and throw it in the case. Again, they can get chipped very easily that way. They can get a little more warped. When you put them in the cases, that keeps them in better working condition. One more thing about reeds is you should always have 3 reeds, at least 3 reeds in your case that are in good working order. 2 of those reeds you should be using, either alternating back and forth, or maybe you're just randomly picking one or the other, but they both work. You know how new reeds can be. They can be kind of a pain to get working right away, but if you always have 2 reeds that are good working order, if you're in a rehearsal or even worse yet, a concert, and that reed chips or just doesn't work anymore, you have another reed that you can count on, that you know is working, you've broken it in, and you can make that switch, and that's really important to be able to do. And then you have that 3rd reed that's brand new, and then once that one of those reeds is no good and you have to throw it away, then you have that 3rd reed that then becomes one of your 2 working reeds, and you can break that in so that both are working. And then of course you're going to have to find a new 3rd reed that's brand new. My suggestion to you is, if right now you have no reeds, or you're down to just 1 or 2, buy a box. A box of 10 reeds is going to probably be just fine, probably more than enough for the rest of the school year if you take good care of them. So go ahead and order that. So that's the discussion on reeds. A couple other things about the instrument you should know. You should all have some cork grease. That cork grease, of course, is to take and put on the end of where your mouthpiece goes on here. So if your mouthpiece isn't sliding on very easily, you can put some cork grease on there. Sometimes people will put it on this section too, where it goes into the main part of your saxophone, and you can do that. I've actually heard an interesting thing. If this thing isn't going in very easily, make sure you unscrew the screw here first. But I've actually heard of people taking a graphite pencil, just a regular pencil, and coloring this section here, and that will help this slide in here a little bit better. Okay, so yeah, so that's something that's really important, is to have a container of cork grease. This will last you for a very long time, and it's very cheap, so make sure you have that. Some people like to have a polishing cloth. It's not absolutely necessary, but if you want to keep your saxophone nice and shiny, you can buy a cloth. Don't spray anything on your saxophone, like cleaning supplies, anything like that, even water. Just use a dry cloth. If your saxophone gets wet, you're outside for marching band or something, don't put your saxophone in the case right away. Make sure you give it a chance to dry off, okay? And then one more thing that you should have is you should have some kind of cleaning swab. sometimes, I don't have one of these, but they have like these really big fluffy swabs that go into your saxophone, and you just store them in there when you put them in the case. And those are fantastic. Use that after every time you play to get the moisture outside of the inside of your saxophone. You can also get one of these swabs, which is just basically a cleaning cloth. It's got a cloth with a big string with a weight at the end here. And make sure when you clean that you put it in the top. Don't go in through your bell. You want to take it in through the way that your air goes. And you just drop this in all the way. And then you actually have to tilt your saxophone over for that weight to come down. Let's see if I can grab it there. I'm going to drop that in there a little bit more. Alright, now I can pull that weight. And then don't go too quick. Sometimes if you go too quick, like right at the entry, this can get jammed, and then it's a little hard to get it back out. Sometimes I've had to take like a pliers to kind of pull this thing back out. So do it gently, not too fast, and pull it back out. And you just have to do it one time. And again, that keeps the moisture from settling in. And the reason you don't want moisture in there is kind of the same thing about the reeds. You can actually get mold growing inside of your saxophone, which of course is not healthy. It's going to smell. It's gross. So take those few seconds to take your reed off of your mouthpiece and to take a cleaning swab and take it through your saxophone before you're done playing. All right. So make sure you have a cleaning swab. Make sure you have at least 3 reeds. Make sure you have some cork grease. Now let me just briefly talk about a couple things that commonly go wrong with the saxophone. One thing is that we have this key called the G sharp key, which is the one that you control. You see my pinky here, and then you can see that key going up and down. Okay. Sometimes we go to press down that G sharp key and that key doesn't go up. Again, sometimes the moisture collects underneath there and that key sticks. All it takes is just taking your finger and just lifting that key one time, and it usually will be fine. If it becomes a problem like on a daily basis, you can get a piece of tissue paper, or some people even use like a little dollar bill, and we'll just either store it in that key when it's in the case, or they'll just put that piece of tissue paper or the dollar bill underneath that key just one time to get the moisture out of there, press it down, and it takes the moisture out. So that's really important, because sometimes you might be playing a G sharp in band and that key's not working, and your director might be like, you know, hey, you're playing the wrong note, that's a G sharp, and you're like, I'm playing G sharp, but your saxophone's not working properly. Another thing that happens is there's springs on these instruments. Let me see if I can find one that's somewhat easy to see. They're a little hard to show you. Let's see if I can get this one on video right here. They look like wires. Hold that up there a little bit. You see that little wire right there? We call them springs. That needs to be on the right side of this little post. It's kind of hard to see that post, but there's a little post right there. If it's not, that spring will actually kind of pop out, and they have like little sharp ends. You gotta be a little careful with them. So if your saxophone isn't working, check and see. There's a lot of these little springs, and make sure that they're all not sticking out. And if one is sticking out, take your finger or a pen or a pencil, or actually a crochet hook works really well, and pop that back in there. Another thing that happens a lot is the octave key mechanism. This guy right here gets bent, and that's because, again, we're not gentle when we put this in and take it apart, and we grab on and we bend that thing, and then it ruins the whole octave key thing. So you might be playing your low notes and they're all coming out high, or you're playing your high notes and they're all coming out low, and that's because your octave key got bent. So that's one of the biggest things. A band director can fix that pretty quickly. Sometimes, and I wouldn't suggest you do this unless you know what you're doing. Sometimes you just need to bend this a little bit out or a little bit back in, and that will solve it. Okay, so those are 3 of the main things I see that go wrong with the saxophone: the G sharp key, a spring issue, or a bent octave key. Sometimes these other keys get bent too. So that's just another reason to be very careful when you put your saxophone in your case, to put it in there gently. And then a couple more things, and then we're done. Don't store anything else in your case besides your saxophone and your reeds and your cork grease and these cleaning materials. A lot of students love putting their music in there. Don't do it. You start putting all that music in there and your method books, and that's pressing down on all these keys, and you're going to bend stuff, especially then when you take your case and you try to close it and you're like cramming it shut, and that's going to bend your saxophone. So don't do that. Last thing, make sure you have a tag on your saxophone case that has your name, your address, and some form of contact information like a phone number or an email address. Very, very important to have that on there. So just to recap the most important things, make sure you have 3 reeds. Never store the reed on your mouthpiece when it's in the case. Another thing is to have cork grease, have a cleaning swab, and then just make sure that you're just taking very good care of it as you're putting it in your case and taking it out of the case and putting it together. Good luck this year, and thank you for watching Maintenance of the Saxophone.